You've been on the medication for 3 weeks. You're not thinking about food constantly anymore. But something else has shifted. Something you weren't expecting. The anxiety that used to wake you at 3 a.m.? Gone. The constant background noise of self-criticism? Quieter. You didn't sign up for a mood medication. Yet here you are. Millions of people taking Ozempic and similar drugs are discovering something strange. A weight loss medication is changing how they feel, not just physically, but emotionally. The data is extraordinary and contradictory. Some studies show depression risk dropping by 44%, others show it nearly tripling. Same drug, opposite outcomes. This isn't a story about weight loss. It's about what happens when a medication designed for your gut accidentally rewires your brain's reward system. And the implications? They're forcing researchers to completely rethink the relationship between metabolism and mental health. Let's start with what these drugs actually do. GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1, a hormone your gut naturally produces after you eat. This hormone tells your brain you're full. It slows digestion. It signals your pancreas to release insulin. Simple metabolic regulation, or so we thought. Medications like semaglutide, sold as Ozempic and Wegovy, mimic this hormone. They bind to the same receptors. But here's what nobody anticipated. GLP-1 receptors aren't just in your gut, they're scattered throughout your brain, in the hippocampus, the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, the very structures that govern mood, memory, and decision-making. When you take these medications, you're not just quieting hunger signals, you're activating receptors and emotional processing centers that scientists are only beginning to understand. By 2026, over 15 million Americans were taking GLP-1 medications. That's 15 million people participating in what amounts to the largest unplanned psychiatric experiment in history. The first major finding came from analyzing medical records of people on semaglutide. During periods when they were taking the medication, their need for psychiatric care dropped by 42%. Depression risk specifically fell by 44%. Anxiety disorders dropped by 38%. These weren't small effects, they were massive shifts in psychiatric outcomes. And it wasn't just mood. A February 2025 randomized controlled trial showed something unexpected. Semaglutide reduced heavy drinking days and alcohol cravings in people with alcohol use disorder. Participants drank less. They craved alcohol less. The medication designed to suppress appetite was somehow suppressing addictive urges too. This makes sense when you understand reward pathways. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter behind motivation and pleasure, doesn't just make you want food, it drives all kinds of wanting. Alcohol, gambling, compulsive shopping, mindless scrolling. They all hijack the same neural circuits. GLP-1 medications seem to turn down the volume on that entire system. A comprehensive 2025 review published in Nature Mental Health analyzed 374 studies, 278 preclinical and 96 clinical. The conclusion? There are real neurobiological mechanisms behind the mood improvements patients report. The brain effects aren't imaginary. They're not just psychological spillover from weight loss. GLP-1 receptors in the brain are doing something we didn't design them to do. But here's where the story gets complicated. Not everyone experiences these benefits. And for some people, the mental health effects go in the opposite direction entirely. Conflicting research published in Nature Scientific Reports found a 98% increased risk of any psychiatric disorder among certain GLP-1 users. Major depression risk was a 195% higher, nearly triple. Same medication showing 44% reductions in depression in some studies, nearly 200% increases in others. What explains this contradiction? The answer seems to lie in individual differences, specifically in how your brain processes dopamine. Not everyone's reward system responds the same way to these medications. An April 2025 paper demonstrated something crucial. GLP-1 medications might actually drive depression and suicidal ideation in people with a specific genetic predisposition toward low dopamine function. Think about it this way. If your dopamine system is already running low and a medication turns down the volume even further, you're not quieting noise, you're eliminating signal. For these individuals, the blunting of reward pathways doesn't feel like freedom from cravings. It feels like the color draining from life. Anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure. The APA's review put it bluntly, the current research results are inconsistent. Some studies suggest that GLP-1s could decrease anxiety and depressive symptoms, while others raise concerns that the drugs worsen symptoms. This is the messy reality of psychiatric research. Human brains are not standardized machines. A medication that helps one person can harm another, and we're still learning to predict who's who. There's another complicating factor. When someone loses significant weight, their mental health often improves for purely psychological reasons. Confidence increases, mobility improves, social stigma decreases. So when people report feeling better on GLP-1 medications, is it the drug directly affecting their brain? Or is it the downstream effects of weight loss changing how they move through the world? Researchers suspect both factors are at play. As one summary put it, both lifestyle improvements and direct brain effects could be at work. The medication itself changes neural chemistry, but so does transformation. This dual mechanism makes studying these drugs incredibly difficult. You can't separate the chemical effects from the psychological effects of the outcomes those chemicals produce. It's like trying to determine whether exercise improves mood because of endorphins, or because of the sense of accomplishment, or because of the social connection at the gym. The answer is probably all three. The March 2026 study that found 42% reduction in psychiatric care utilization couldn't fully separate these factors. But the researchers noted something important. The benefits appeared quickly, often before significant weight loss occurred. That timing matters. If mood improvements came only after substantial weight loss, you could explain them psychologically. But when they appear in the first weeks, that suggests something more direct. The gut-brain axis, the bidirectional communication highway between your digestive system and your central nervous system, is emerging as one of the most important frontiers in mental health research. Your gut produces about 95% of your body's serotonin. It contains more neurons than your spinal cord. It's not just digesting food, it's processing information and influencing emotion. GLP-1 medications may be teaching us something profound about this connection. When you change gut signaling, you change brain function. The boundary between physical and mental health is more porous than we realized. So, what does this mean if you're considering these medications? The honest answer is that the science isn't settled yet, but there are some things worth knowing. First, if you're thinking about GLP-1 treatment, you might want to discuss your mental health history with your prescriber. Not just current symptoms, but your baseline relationship with mood and motivation. Any family history of depression matters too. That genetic predisposition toward low dopamine function, it often runs in families. Your prescriber should factor this into the risk-benefit calculation. Second, consider monitoring your mood carefully during the first few months of treatment. Some people notice improvements quickly. Others notice a subtle flatness, a dampening they might not immediately recognize as problematic. One practical approach: keep a brief daily log for the first 12 weeks. Just a few words about energy, motivation, whether things that usually bring you joy still do. Subtle changes are easier to spot in hindsight. If you notice that the things you used to look forward to feel flat, not anxious, not sad, just muted, that's worth a conversation with your doctor. Anhedonia can creep in quietly. Third, and this is crucial, don't assume that weight loss medications are just physical. They interact with neural systems governing emotion, reward, and decision-making. That's not a side effect, that's the effect. This raises an uncomfortable question that researchers are only beginning to grapple with. If a medication changes your personality, your desires, your relationship with pleasure itself, who are you on the other side? Some users describe it as finally feeling like themselves, freed from compulsions that never felt authentic. Others describe losing something, a spark, an intensity, a hunger that gave life meaning. These are not just medical questions, they're philosophical ones, and they're being asked by millions of people in real time, often without realizing they're part of an experiment nobody designed. The systematic review of psychiatric effects noted that we need better screening tools and monitoring protocols. Right now, most prescribers aren't systematically tracking mental health changes in GLP-1 patients. That's beginning to change. As the psychiatric data accumulates, more clinicians are incorporating mood assessment into their GLP-1 prescribing protocols, but standardized practice lags behind emerging evidence. If your prescriber doesn't ask about mental health, you can bring it up yourself. Should I watch for any mood changes? Is a reasonable question that opens a useful conversation. There's a broader lesson here that extends beyond GLP-1 medications. The wall we've built between physical health and mental health is artificial. The body and brain are one system. Gut hormones affect mood. Inflammation affects cognition. Sleep affects emotional regulation. Blood sugar affects anxiety. We've known these connections exist, but we've treated them as curiosities rather than fundamentals. GLP-1 medications are forcing a reckoning. When a diabetes drug dramatically reduces psychiatric hospital visits, we can't keep pretending metabolism and mental health are separate domains. If you're finding this kind of research interesting, you might want to subscribe. We explore the psychology behind how bodies and minds actually connect, not just how we assume they do. The coming years will bring more clarity. Larger studies, longer follow-ups, better genetic screening. We'll learn which patients are likely to benefit psychiatrically and which ones need extra monitoring. But right now, in 2026, we're in the messy middle. The data is contradictory because human biology is contradictory. What helps one person harms another, and we're still learning to tell them apart. So the next time you hear about Ozempic, remember, this isn't just a weight loss story. It's a story about what happens when we accidentally discover that our gut has been talking to our brain all along. And about what happens when we start listening. Even if we weren't quite ready for what it had to say. Thanks for spending some time with this. If you found it useful, a like helps others find us. And if you want more like this, you know what to do.